Okay, young historians, hope you had a great Thanksgiving, and we are returning to school. It's December now, can you believe it? And we are on the edge of the precipice, definitely jumping into the Civil War. You have an assessment, pen and paper assessment, on Thursday the 5th at CT. This is just an overview of, or a review of what we've been talking about for the last, week or so. And then also, this slideshow is available online, and it's got some links in it to a whole bunch of videos that if you want to watch them, if you feel better reviewing that way. So it's not a huge test. This is not a bar exam or anything like this. It's going to be either one piece of paper or one piece of paper and then another side of a paper. It depends, because it depends on how big I want some things to be, like size-wise, like pictures or images or things. So, but whatever the case, we are on the edge of the precipice. We know that. That was Henry Clay saying that. As you review, your big review document is your annotations for you're reading your annotations. And make sure that you're digging into that and annotating and asking questions and interacting. That's how we learn from reading. It really is. You got to be interactive with text, or else it just it doesn't sit in your brain very much. But these are the things that as you go through and review, maybe go through this, Tuesday night or something like that, or during a CT or something, and then that's when you come see me and you ask me some questions, or you go to the resources, you go back to your reading. This is the kind of the big stuff that's going to be on the assessment, and then of course there's one other thing, secession, which we're going to get to. So we started out with how the North and South differed. Remember, we did a GIM kit. You should just know in general the basic differences between the North and the South in the years prior to the Civil War. We call that the antebellum era. Yes, slavery was a major issue, but there were a couple other things too. But it definitely was about slavery, and of course in this cartoon you'll notice the Constitution. Also, remember that there were differences within the regions when it came to views, like within the North and within the South. Remember, you have on the South, for the South here to the left, that Southern rebel, right? That's somebody who is the firebrand, the fire eater, somebody who wants slavery everywhere. There were realists who maybe weren't enslavers, but they knew that it was realistic for the South to keep it because it was such an economic power. And then in the middle of both, you have Southern moderates and Northern moderates. Their goal was to keep the United States together at any way that they possibly could. Most of them would probably favor popular sovereignty when it came to slavery. Then on the right side there, you get the free soilers. Those were the people who did not want slavery to expand, in some reasons for moral reasons, and some reasons because they didn't want African Americans to move to free territories. And then finally, you got your abolitionists. Those are hardcore. They wanted to end slavery everywhere, not just in the new territories, but in the South as well. And so obviously, these were the people that were making decisions, especially when it comes to the Senate. We started with the Missouri Compromise, 1820. Henry Clay makes a compromise. The basics of it: Missouri comes in as a slave state, Maine comes in as a free state. That balances out the Senate. That was the big thing. They wanted a balance of free states and slave states. And then there was a line drawn at 36 degrees, 30 minutes north latitude. Right above on the map there, you can see the Arkansas Territory. It said that slavery would be allowed in territories below that map, or below that line, but not allowed in the territories above that line. That means that in the unorganized territory from the Louisiana Purchase, there would not be slavery. This was going to take care of everything, because every square inch of the United States was decided, is it going to be free or slave, until the Mexican War. If you remember the Mexican War, the United States was fighting against Mexico during Manifest Destiny, and they got all this land in the Southwest. And California became a state very quickly because of, say it on three with me, 1, 2, 3, gold. The gold rush. And so that was going to upset the balance of slave and free states. So if we remember, let me get my little drawer here. All right. Henry Clay supported a compromise, or pushed a compromise, that said California would become a free state. All right. North likes that. The Utah Territory and the New Mexico Territory would be organized, which means the federal government would have a presence there, and it would be left to popular sovereignty, left to the settlers that were there. That was more of a push to get Southern support. We know that in Washington, D.C., the slave trade, not slavery, but the slave trade, would be outlawed. And then finally, to support the South, a stricter fugitive slave law would be passed. There's also some stuff with Texas, but we're not worried about that. But what this does is this allows possibly slavery to expand. If you remember in class, I described both of them as Band-Aids. Okay, so that would be my editorial cartoon. And the Compromise of 1850, I also described it as maybe pressing pause on the going to the edge of the precipice. All right. The harshest part of it was the Fugitive Slave Act. That was a big deal. You should know the effects and the impact of that. You know, what does the fugitive slave law do? Well, it upsets people in the North. It obviously upsets abolitionists. It actually pushes Harry Beecher Stowe to write the great Uncle Tom's Cabin. It brings slavery to the North, especially in Wisconsin. And Wisconsin outlaws the Fugitive Slave Act. And you're going to read in secession statements that some southern states were upset that northern states were not supporting the Fugitive Slave Act. That's one of the reasons for secession as well. So there's a good little video here from Matthew Pinkster. I like that dude. This is going to be the kind of the big topic of that Compromise of 1850. From there, we talked about the Kansas-Nebraska Act, trying to build that choo-choo train. Where's my little drawer here? That choo-choo train across here. Choo-choo-choo-choo-choo-choo. Which, by the way, it eventually does go across there. It goes right through Omaha right there. It's kind of cool. Or up here. It's up there. But anyways, Stephen Douglas wanted to build that choo-choo train there. And what is that going to do? That is going to, in order to get support from the South, he is going to say, let's take what was in the Missouri Compromise before, right here, and let's turn it into two territories, Kansas and Nebraska. We need a federal presence out there because there are Native Americans there. And in order to get Southern support, let's open it up to popular sovereignty, which totally reverses the Missouri Compromise. The Missouri Compromise had answered the question for 34 years. This rips off the Band-Aid, all right, big time. And what happens, we know that a whole bunch of anti-slavery people rush up there, a whole bunch of pro-slavery people rush in there, and we've got bleeding Kansas with John Brown, and just 200 Americans are going to die. It's bad stuff. And this presses fast forward on the edge of the precipice, right? Then we get to 1857, the Dred Scott decision. Remember, Dred Scott was an enslaved person who was taken to a free state, Illinois, and then a free territory, which at that point was Wisconsin, now Minnesota. And then he came back to Missouri, and he, with help from abolitionists, sued for his freedom, basically saying that if I've been in a free state, how can I be an enslaved person? Goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and that Roger B. Taney, he is going to issue the decision. And the basics of the decision, if you remember, and hopefully this is in your reading and hopefully on your notations, 3 big things were stated. Number 1, African Americans aren't citizens. Not just enslaved people, but African Americans aren't citizens, so they can't sue. They have no rights at all. No rights that the white man should expect to support or anything like that. Number 2, enslaved people are property, and because they are property rights are protected. Enslaved people have no rights under the Dred Scott decision, but enslavers do. Property rights are protected, and the government cannot take away your property without due process of law. So therefore, it's going to basically say that slavery is legal in all territories. And in theory, enslavers can take enslaved people to northern states, and they are still property. But the third thing, it also said that it was really a racist statement by the Supreme Court. It said that African Americans are inferior and didn't use the word African Americans or that term, but that African Americans are inferior and have no rights in which the white man should respect and should be, put into slavery for their benefit. This is the Supreme Court of the United States. It is the top dog, the big kahuna. The only way you can change a Supreme Court decision, say it with me, is a new Supreme Court decision or a constitutional amendment, which wasn't going to happen in the 1850s. So this was a huge blow to abolitionists and their cause, but it actually riled them up even more. Huge support for the Southern rebels, for Southerners, the slaveocracy, the leaders, and it goes down as the worst Supreme Court decision in the history of our Supreme Court. That decision and other things were debated during the Lincoln-Douglas debates in 1858. Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas. Let's see if I can get him here. Abraham Lincoln, tall guy right there. Stephen Douglas, short guy right here. They're both running for Senate in the state of Illinois. And Lincoln's going to challenge Douglas to a series of debates. In the debates, their basic arguments: Lincoln was for stopping the expansion of slavery. He was anti-slavery, stopped the expansion of slavery. Douglas was anti-slavery, but believed in popular sovereignty. Neither of them were abolitionists. Lincoln, because of the Constitution. Douglas, basically, he just felt that let the people decide if they want to, be enslavers, even though he didn't like the slavery. But the big thing is that Lincoln sort of trapped Douglas with the Freeport Doctrine, where Stephen Douglas was asked by Lincoln, can the people of a territory not allow slavery to spread? And Douglas said, well, if they pass laws that don't support slavery, or develop a police force that doesn't support slavery, then yes, they actually could stop slavery in the territory. And that really upset Southern Democrats, Douglas being a Democrat. It upset them because they think that slavery should go to every territory because of the thing before we just talked about, Dred Scott decision. Whatever the case, we talked about it in class. Douglas won the election, but lost support from Southern Democrats. Lincoln lost the election, but a lot of people were following this all across the North and the South. And Lincoln got some popularity and some publicity, which is going to come in handy in 1860. We know that John Brown, let me get my little arrow here. There we go. John Brown is going to try to invade Harper's Ferry, an arsenal, and take over this arsenal and get a whole bunch of guns and start a huge slave revolt. And it doesn't go very well for John Brown and his family. You can see him in the middle up against that little fire. That's actually a fire engine or a fire truck, believe it or not. John Brown is found guilty of treason, and he is killed, and he goes to the gallows, and he says that I, John Brown, firmly believe that this great nation, the crimes of this great nation shall not be wiped away but with blood, and then he's executed. And he divides the nation even more. He is going to be mentioned in secession statements as well, not by name, but definitely by actions, because the South is basically going to be saying he is what the North wants to do to the South. And we finally get to the election of 1860, the most important election in American history. I hope you heard that. We have four candidates from left to right. We've got Abraham Lincoln, doesn't want slavery to expand. We've got Stephen Douglas, popular sovereignty, the Northern Democrat. We've got John C. Breckinridge, the Southern Democrat, Dred Scott decision, slave code should support slavery in all territories. And we got John Bell, constitutional union. What can we do to keep this nation together? On election day, Abraham Lincoln wins the election without winning any southern states, without winning any state that where slavery is legal, without getting a vote in 10 of those states. But Lincoln still wins the election because he gets a majority of the electoral vote. And because of that, Abe Lincoln is elected. And because of that, this is why it's the most important election in American history. 7 southern states secede. Okay? Now, we dig into why the southern states secede in class on Monday and Tuesday, if you're listening to this early. But why did those southern states secede? For a variety of reasons. You will see states' rights. You will see them mention John Brown. You will see them mention the Fugitive Slave Act. You will see them mention the election of 1860 and Abraham Lincoln. One of them even calls out his vice president, Hannibal Hamlin. All right? You'll see all of that. But all of them, all 7 of the southern states, including the 4 that wrote the long secession ordinances, all of them say that slavery is the reason why. So, when somebody ever argues that the Civil War or secession was not about slavery, you need to beg to disagree, or beg to differ, I should say, and then say, did you read the primary sources? Because you did, or you will, and that's why. So, on this link, you're going to have a little, you can review with a little GIM kit, okay? And we're going to do it in class too. GIM kits are great because they're fun, but also they help you know what you know and help you know what you don't know. So if you have any questions, I'm going to be around Wednesday after school to answer questions. And yeah, so that's the edge of the precipice, and we're going to head right into the Civil War after that. And we're gonna end the Civil War, believe it or not, by the time we get out of, or we go home for winter break, and then we're gonna come back, talk a little bit about Reconstruction, but we're gonna go heavy with that little NHD thing. So hope everything's doing good. Let me know how I can help you, and American History Rules.